Welcome to Tide Talks. It's sponsored by RWJ Barnabas Health, the official healthcare provider of Princeton Athletics. This is a special series that we're doing monthly to celebrate 50 years of women's athletics at Princeton University. I am your host, Krista Samaras, class of 1999. And I have with me today, Kara Nortman, class of 1997, politics major, rower at Princeton, and now a prominent VC in Los Angeles. She's a managing partner at Upfront Ventures, and she's one of three people who founded Angel City FC Football Club, a professional women's sports team in Los Angeles, and also community impact organization. Kara, welcome to Tide Talks.
Oh, so nice to meet you.
Let's go back and start with your experience at Princeton. What was it like to be an athlete at Princeton? As I like to say, at the end of the millennium. What was it like to be you at Princeton? What was it like to be at Princeton then?
I think when you're at Princeton, they always say youth is wasted on the young. You're so excited to be at Princeton because it's such a privilege to be able to go there. But I don't know if I was super self-aware about what it meant to be an athlete. But I would say, like, looking back and trying to remember, I knew when I got to Princeton that I needed to join stuff. And I just didn't know what that stuff was, but I'm sort of a joiner at heart. And so when I got to Princeton, I definitely had an identity as an athlete. I played a lot of different sports in high school, and candidly, I wasn't probably good enough at any of them, or I wasn't good enough at any of them to play at Princeton. I actually tried to walk onto the basketball team, which was my top sport in high school. And so I went to the basketball coach, and that didn't really go all that well. And then I literally signed up for 3 sports teams. Yeah, back then, you probably remember, you'd go into the gym and you kind of just sign up for stuff. And I literally signed up for 3 sports teams, Outdoor Action, the Environmental Club, Whig Clio, both some conservative group and liberal group. I was liberal, by the way, but I just was trying it all. Yeah. And so the 3 sports teams, I literally signed up to try crew, rugby, and the ski team. 2 out of the actually, all 3 of them were things we didn't have in LA. So I was like, well, this sounds cool. I watched Oxford Blues when I was a kid. So give this a try.
Wait, that's amazing. I too tried to try out for the basketball team. It didn't go very far, but good thing I had lacrosse to fall back on. Were you in high school interested in stuff? And did that interest in a lot of stuff carry over into your life from Princeton until now?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I'm like a curious person and a joining person and an interested person. I think the big transition maybe many of us have is when you go from probably being pretty hard on yourself and trying to achieve academically and do these other things that to where you have very few hours in the day, to Princeton where you have a lot of hours in the day. I kind of felt like when I got to Princeton, I had just kind of, I didn't know what I wanted to do next. Like, I'd always known I wanted to go to a great college. And then when I got there, I didn't know what I wanted to do next. I had 12 hours of class, right? And so I was like, well, I'm just going to sign up for a bunch of things that I'm interested in. And it was really the first time in my life where I was just not that worried about achieving academically. Yeah, shows in my freshman grades. But I think I had a true freshman experience where I didn't worry about all the stuff I'd worried about probably far too much when I was in high school.
And when you were graduated from college, I read that you were choosing between working at a nonprofit and Morgan Stanley. And what ultimately made you choose the Morgan Stanley route?
I think part of it was actually when I got to Princeton. I mean, I did a couple things that I think of now. I mean, I went to lectures and this, that, and the other. Candidly, I didn't do as many things as I wish I had done looking back. But I rode crew, and that took a lot of my time. I mean, it's one of the only sports that's 6 days a week, year round. There's no necessarily season. It's the day you get there to the day you leave. For most of the years we went dry, which was a big deal, as you can imagine back then. So the other thing I ended up doing was I was an officer of my eating club, and I was the only female officer of my eating club. And that was I was in one of those clubs that had just become co-ed at the time. And so I kind of honestly I guess I'd say I kind of lost the plot on what I wanted to do professionally. I sort of woke up senior year and I was like, what am I going to do with my life? Honestly, I think the beauty of Princeton is you get to just be a liberal arts major at a place that trains you to think and be creative and build friendships and care about, values and all the things we all like to think Princeton does for us, and I think does do for us. But I did not know what I wanted to do. So I just I couldn't apply to Princeton in Asia because I didn't speak any Asian languages. So I applied to Project 55, which was the nonprofit route. And then I just saw all these people going through, a year ahead of me in suits, interviewing for jobs on Wall Street. And I was like, well, maybe I'll try that. And I can always go to law school. But I honestly just had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And I just felt like I probably shouldn't jump into a grad school before I went and actually did some work. So then in a weird way, I talk about the nonprofit job. So I almost worked for Ralph Nader's organization back then. It was like a consumer protection organization, and Morgan Stanley. Like those were the two things I was deciding between. And in a lot of ways, I think they still represent the two sides of things I'm interested in. And I went the route of Morgan Stanley, but I've like kind of gone back in the direction of, activism and interests and soccer teams and other stuff recently, like in the last few years.
And why? Like I know you've had a sort of a long and storied career. You've made a bunch of different pivots or hinge moments where you've done different things. You've been in operations and investing. One, what has been your favorite job outside of the jobs you currently have? Let's just remove those. And two, why in the last couple of years have you sort of like grown your interest in a lot of different stuff?
Well, I'll answer. I'll start with favorite job. My favorite job is what I do right now. But I think whatever I'm doing right now, I'd probably say is my favorite job because I'm a generally optimistic person. But I love venture capital. I'm at Upfront Ventures. We're the largest venture fund in Southern California. We invest in companies right when they're starting, founder, idea, no metrics, and you just get to be deeply curious and you try to think like a beginner, and then you try to be an advocate for helping this company grow or keep that going, and honestly be like almost like a lifelong Princeton student. So I would say that's my favorite, but every job I've enjoyed and gotten things out of. In terms of, what was the second question?
I want to ask you now, now I'm following up on that. What were some of the hinge moments in your career where you're like, this is really exciting? Maybe it seems like it's a different direction. Were there places where you really took a pivot and it was a kind of a risky decision, or no?
Yeah, there were. But the way I like to answer this question now is I think the biggest thing, the hardest thing, the riskiest thing for me to have realized over time is that when you get to Princeton, and even when you come out of Princeton, you have a pretty perfect looking resume. And I think you're almost overly trained to build your resume. And I think the riskiest thing was realizing I needed to take more risk and do things that were scary and believe in myself more. And I mean, like the soccer team that we started, Angel City FC, is a good example of that. But if you look at my background, yes, I made job changes, but I stayed everywhere for reasonably long periods of time for someone of my generation. I was very loyal. I was a good citizen. I was always building for the future. And it's only in the last few years that I got to a point where I'm kind of comfortable talking about failures and taking more risk and being comfortable that to take risk means you have to be willing to fail and feel the shame of it and let go of it. And so I would say that's kind of, if you go through my background, it's pretty, I don't know, it looks good on paper, but there are moments of major failure. And actually, I don't know, taking it back to Crew, it was a big up and down experience for me. It's a huge part of my identity. It's a huge part of my friendships. I have one of the greatest mentors and role models in my life and career is a woman named Lori Daphne, who runs the Crew team, who gave me a chance repeatedly, even though, I was good on an erg, which is the thing you pull until you throw up to try to get a score to earn your right to go get a seat in a boat that goes on the water. But I was not all that great on water. Like the actual rowing motion was not supernatural to me. And, I could go on in this for a long time, but I would say, I think back to the opportunity she gave me and the fact that she valued not just what I think brought to the boat, but probably what I brought to the team and my relationships and friendships, my enthusiasm for it and my persistence. And I hung on to do it for 4 years because it's a no-cut sport. And we won 2 national championships while I was there. But I was never in the boat that won the national championship. I like to say, the boat that pushed the boat that won the national championship. Show up every day and see, am I in a boat or not? And to Lori's credit, she always talked to me. She always gave me feedback. And she kept me engaged, right? And she kept me there. And, senior year was probably one of the most gratifying seasons of my 4 years there. So I do look back at that and like the failure and identity issues I had as somebody who was captain of my basketball team in high school and had a lot of identity around that. And, I've been texting today with 3 of my closest friends from the Princeton Crew team, who are still my closest friends.
So, as a venture capitalist, you're looking for founders, ideas, especially at their early stages. Do you it's been so interesting to do research on this because I'm like, I think I would have really liked venture capital, but do you feel like it's the idea or the founder that you link onto first? And first, I'll ask that. And then the second is, does that mentoring from Lori, that feedback really help you? Has it set a precedent for you to generate feedback for people who maybe you're saying no to?
First on the VC question, and then I'll go to Crew. To me, it's about the founder, 100% about the founder, because and people would answer this question differently, but there are 99 reasons why this isn't going to work. And there's going to be 99 different reasons why it's not going to work tomorrow. And almost every concept I back, usually I do what's called the seed round or an A round. I'm usually the very first board member. I usually put a couple $1 million in, maybe more. And for the ones that are working, I may have 30 or $40 million over time, and they become Ring or Goat or, these big companies that people use, but they start, nobody's ever heard of them. They don't know them. And so I think I look for somebody who has a real North Star, who knows, has an earned insight as to why they're trying to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish. Then I have to look at, do they know something about technology? Can it scale in a way that fits the kind of investing I do? Right. And then you do have to be excited by the idea. I mean, it's usually not 180 degrees away from the idea. And so if you're like, God, I don't want to think about this, I sort of say, I need to be driving my husband crazy, talking about it at night, talking about it at cocktail parties when that used to happen. Because you need to be their thought partner. And if you're not excited about it, you're not going to be a good thought partner. And then, I'm thinking about this real time with regard to Lori and Crew. I think she really, my favorite show is Ted Lasso. I don't know if anybody watches it, but I'll give it. I love
it. Yeah, I binge watch it, of course.
No vested interest, but if you think about if I think about Lori, she cared about the team, she cared about the psychology, she cared about the dynamic. It's just who she is. She cared about excellence. She wouldn't put me in a boat if I didn't earn it. But I think the 1 + 1 = 5 kind of concept versus 1 + 1 = 1.5 is really important. Crew is what I think of as a weak link sport. So is soccer, meaning you're only as good as your weakest rower or your weakest player. Whereas something like basketball is a strong link sport. You can have LeBron James, and you just need to make sure he's supported properly. Still, it's always best if you have a psychological unit that's there for each other. But I think Lori really understood that. And honestly, I went back for my 20th reunion a couple of years ago. I hadn't seen her in a while. I showed up at the Tanks with my middle daughter, and she just jumped in and was like, let me show you how to row, and she was so sweet and kind to my daughter. And I was not her best rower. And she didn't know I was going to go start a professional soccer team or a venture capitalist. And she's been inviting me to kind of jump in launches and come visit and hang out ever since. And I put her through some pain having conversations in Dillon Gym when I was like, how do I get into a boat? And she would spend the time telling me, and she gave me the tools, and it was up to me to get there, but she really invested, I think, in the human side. And I think that is very consistent with how I do venture capital. And it's different in a lot of ways than how a lot of people do venture capital. Because it's such a transactional business, and it's so fast moving that I think a lot of just doing what you say you're going to do and caring about people is actually a real competitive advantage.
Yeah. And actually talking to a mutual friend, I was asking her, because I had read a lot about you, people describing you as funny and empathetic. And she was like, oh my gosh, she is dogged, and she does the interpersonals really well. Though she's playing the long game, she's such a good job at the short game. And so is it fun for you to be building these relationships? Does it feel overwhelming? Because when I look at all the pieces that go into what you do, I'm like, this feels exhausting to maintain and be building these relationships, finding founders way early on, getting attracted to ideas, getting fired up, being constantly so fired up about possibility. Is it fun for you?
It's so much fun. I honestly, I think though, I don't, I think when you do these things, you talk about your strengths and all the highlights, but we all have our down moments. And what I say to people when they're thinking about a job or trying to figure out if they like their job, because no job is perfect, is are you kind of in the zone and enjoying it 51% of the time? If it's more than half, it's 1% more than half, I think you're better than most of the universe. Nothing's perfect. And I think people who hold perfect up on a pedestal it's just hard. And so, look, I think if anybody's watching this who's going through a journey of figuring out who they are, I don't know, I spent half of my career in operating roles, running teams, being on a team, building products. I also love that. And so sometimes I don't know, if this is my personality or this is where I'm supposed to be. But I would say that the thing I really love about the job, I guess the short game, is at least 51% of the time, I walk away from conversations being like, that was a great conversation and I learned something and maybe I gave them some feedback that was helpful. And then I just try not to get too wrapped up in thinking I don't know. I just try to get not too wrapped up in like the meta parts of the game because, I didn't want to go back into venture because I was afraid of Twitter, honestly. Like I had been in venture and I didn't want to go back because I'm like, all VCs tweet. And like I would, Princeton reared me in the honor code and I'd be like fact checking and trying to get it perfect. That just sounds exhausting. And so,
well, you mentioned that Angel City was a big risk for you at the time. You're in terms of like managing your fear of failure. Where did the idea start, and why did it feel risky?
Yeah. And by the way, that's one thing you asked before, which I'll tie into this, which is I did all sorts of like activism kind of things when I was younger. I think Princeton really does kind of like talk about in the nation's service, and some of us do it, some of us don't. I think if you don't do it, you kind of feel guilty you're not doing it, and we do it at certain times of our lives and not others. And what I found is that like gender activism and like activism around difference, and that's racial activism and cognitive diversity activism, is what resonates with me. What I found though was that I totally lost the plot on it for the 10 years while I was having my 3 daughters. I just like raised kids, did my job, occasionally tried to be a good wife. And like, that was all I could kind of handle. And then once my youngest kid, I think, got to an age where she could like wake up and brush her own teeth, I think that's when I found my way back to hobbies. And I would put everything I do outside of work and my kids in the vein of hobbies. And I think like when you have true intrinsic energy for activism, soccer, extra meetings, et cetera, like that's when it turns into something that we can call, I don't know, a nonprofit, a soccer team. And so it actually, the risk, I guess, doesn't feel that risky to me from the start. I was just like kind of irritated that I couldn't find jerseys to buy for my daughters of the U.S. Women's National Team in 2015, and that I couldn't find the games to watch anywhere other than Yahoo, which was streamed from like 80 million yards away in 2015. And like, it's a long story, but it was a whole series of, I thought I was just being an irritating person talking about the opportunity, and it felt like a venture capital-like opportunity. And people can find women's soccer if they can follow it, if they know a team exists in their market, if it's on any sort of media channel where they can watch it regularly, they can connect with Crystal Dunn and Alex Morgan and Megan Rapinoe, and then they'll get into it. You just couldn't do it, right? And so it started off like really innocently, and then I got into the pay equity and the activism, and then I got Natalie Portman involved, and Julie Ehrman, and Abby Wambach, and Julie Foudy, and all these amazing women athletes that I looked up to my whole life.
I know.
But the risk was then we started trying to like start a team in a different way, and a lot of people told us it was impossible. Like probably 95% of the people who spoke to us were like, that would be awesome, but here's all the reasons it's not going to work. And we got a ton of no's, and I had to find someone to run it because I have a day job, but I was really passionate about getting it off the ground. And this was like a second day job for 6 months. And, we got to a point where it was like, it could succeed, it could fail, but I need to put everything I have on the line because I really believe in this. And, and now a year and a half later, everyone's like, oh my God, this is amazing. And people are begging us to put money in and all the crushing it kind of things. But it was not that way 18 months ago. It was really hard.
And the community impact piece of the organization, that was a critical part of the model that you guys were building?
From the beginning. I mean, This did start with like activism, and we have to be careful with activism because it's also like, for this to work, we need it to be capitalism. We need to show people that women can make money, that women's sports is desirable to watch as men's sports. But we started, like, this all started because Natalie Portman and I were like, hey, let's create an event to bring people to a U.S. Women's National Team friendly game before they went to the 2019 World Cup to bring awareness to their pay equity fight because they weren't being paid in the same way the men were. And so we had community impact from the beginning. And honestly, it's the most special, one of the most special communities I've ever worked with. I mean, I did the same thing with a group of women in venture capital. We have an organization called All Raise that's similar, but there's something about soccer and sports, and I think this ties back to Princeton sports, where it's fun, it's tribal, it's exciting. And so men, I have this huge group now of male VCs from England, Pakistan, and India who I like am on Discord servers with and fantasy leagues with, as well as like men and women in LA and entertainment who had nothing to do with. It's just like it builds community in a way that is like catching more bees with honey. And so it's been really, really special. I think the way the mission, both community and just the fun of sports, has brought people together.
And you were saying that there's a sort of a fire starter, like there's another team that's sort of taken your lead as an opportunity to build, that goes back to a Princeton connection. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So about a month or so ago, it was announced that Angie Long and her husband, Chris Long, who are both classmates of mine at Princeton, have purchased a professional women's soccer team, which is the NWSL. They have purchased the Royals, which are moving from Salt Lake City to Kansas City. We in LA are starting a new team called Angel City FC. Go to We Are Angel City or angelcity.com and sign up. And anyway, but we're the first majority women-owned, women-led team. They're the second one. There are 9 other teams. There will be more. Expansion is now going crazy across the country. Reach out to me if you're interested. But it all started because Angie, because Chris, it actually all started because Chris reached out to me for my 97 annual giving donation to Princeton. And he had been at the World Cup. And I said, no way, I had been at the World Cup. And then we started talking about it, and Angie called me. She's like, how do I do this? And I put her in touch with all the people who helped me. And what took us 15 months took her 4 months. And so it's really truly the first time that Old Nassau and the Old Girls Network is playing out in a way that I think is really, really powerful. You need to do it with men and women. We need diversity across the board, gender, cognitive, race, et cetera. And I think you'll see that reflected in both of our ownership groups. And ours, I mentioned some of the people. They have Patrick Mahomes. Am I saying his name right? The Kansas City quarterback, and his fiance, Brittany, are involved. And just they have like a very similar community of people from Kansas City, which is, like we have Natalie Portman, Eva Longoria, America Ferrara, Mia Hamm. They have the similar kind of thing, just Kansas City style. And so we're all trying to build impact-oriented communities, but that do well and get people to come to stadiums and watch the content and buy the merch. So you now have 2 female former Princeton athletes. She, I believe, was captain of the rugby team in a national championship, who are 2 of the 11 owners of the NWSL.
That's so cool. I mean, clearly you're passionate about it. I'm a beneficiary of a mother who also wanted the same opportunities in girls lacrosse in our town as there were already existing for my 2 brothers. And so, that panned out into be her humongous business, which is an event company in lacrosse. Is this still about like where your daughters can see more soccer, where they can have more opportunities? Does it distill down to that still, or is it now like it's not just for girls, it's for everybody? It's like everybody's all pumped about it, because those are the vibes you're giving me. Starting with the girl stuff.
No, I mean, well, I don't. It's hard to know, right? You only live in your own eyes. So I sort of joke around now that I feel like my 3 daughters were a front. It's a really, really powerful, it's been a really powerful thing for our relationship. One of my daughters is very into soccer, so it's particularly fun for us. The other 2, I'd say, are into experiences. So they love coming to the games and getting free pretzels and, sparkling water. But I think they're, that it's been as fun to experience it with my husband and my parents and my brother and my sister, who are also both Princeton graduates, class of 2004. This is for everyone. We have men in our syndicate. We have former NFL players, former MLS players. We're playing at LAFC, which is one of the 2 big teams in LA Stadium, which is one of the best stadiums built in the United States or in the world. Mm-hmm. We have one of the biggest soccer players of all time, who is famous for playing for the LA Galaxy, Kobe Jones. And this is about like an experience that women, men, 20-year-olds looking for a fun thing to do, to families and kids will all do together. For me, it's special because I have 3 daughters, but I'm sure it'd be special if I had 3 sons. It's it's what I know.
It's awesome community building. I think of LA as a big, massive community, and it's great that you're gathering all these charges to make this thing happen. What's the bravest thing you've ever done?
I hope I haven't done it yet.
Oh, that's the best answer I've ever heard, and legitimately ask everybody that question. I love that.
I'm trying to think. I don't know that I've done it yet. I think everything I've done has still been relatively safe. I don't know, probably the bravest thing I've probably ever done was quit my terrific, well-paying job that I enjoyed when I was 6 months pregnant with my third daughter to start a company, which went just okay, to be honest. That going just okay. You know, I sold it to someone else. I made sure all the investors got their money back, et cetera, et cetera. But that was the first time I sort of experienced not doing things at the highest levels that I wanted to do them in, that were like my core thing, right? I could still say Princeton was Princeton and Crew was a part of Princeton, but I had other things that I could tie my identity to, even if I felt like I wasn't excelling at the highest levels of the highest team. That was like, it was quite hard. And I did it while having my third daughter and a newborn, and, you know, making all the mistakes that I had coached founders not to make for years. And I learned more coming out of that than anything. And honestly, it is, I think, the thing that's made me comfortable with, like, things are going to go well, things are going to go poorly. And so I really do hope my greatest risks are still to come. I mean, it's super cliche to say, but you know, I look up to these athletes. I really look up to, like, this year, or I guess last year now, the Ruth Bader Ginsburg is the easiest, you know, it's common. People would say that, but through the work I'm doing, getting exposure to like people like Gloria Steinem, from Gloria Steinem to Mia Hamm, and looking up to someone like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who I never had a chance to meet. She did her best work in her 70s or 80s. I mean, she did her best work her whole career, but I think this idea that we are what we are right now, that our job is who we are, that we may have 10 years to do it well, or that it's the only thing we're going to do, or that we're a parent right now and that prevents us from being, you know, from doing another thing, you know, in 10 years. I think that's wrong. And so I just never will retire. I don't know what I'll be doing when I'm 70 or 80, but I hope it's like a second or third or fourth chapter. And I think having sort of like a real growth mindset about trying new things, taking risks, failing, trying again, is kind of the way I look at the world. So I hope I always answer it. Maybe I've never taken my greatest risk, and I know I'm going to have to kind of move through shame when I take risks and they don't work, because it's still a work in progress for me.
Well, I love that the bravery that your value is still ahead of you, and the risks that you value are still ahead of you. I also think that bringing up Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Gloria Steinem, it's interesting because I think that throughout their career, they're sort of notorious for, I mean, literally notorious BRG, but for planting seeds. And when I look at like your volume of work and what you do now, it's interesting. I wonder what are you intending to grow? Is it something that it's deliberate? And I don't even mean for you to answer that right now, but it's really inspiring as somebody who's just been on your trail for the last couple of days. It's been really exciting to watch your whole career develop in short, since I've been researching it for the last couple of days. So I so appreciate like your time, your candor, your energy, like the way you just like say it like it is. And it's really awesome and fills me with pride to have shared some time at Princeton, though we didn't know each other then.
Well, we'll have to hang out at a reunion. And honestly, I feel
Totally.
so lucky every day that I got a chance to go to Princeton. Skill and luck and where you're born in life and all these things play a role. But I think we can all look back and realize we all had probably a little bit of luck with the things that happened. And, you know, I've been on my Princeton WhatsApp chat group already 15 times today. And so grateful to be able to do this with you guys. And here's to Tiger, 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 sis, 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 boom, 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 ba. I don't know, Princeton as a whole.
I love it. Thank you so much for your time, Kara. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much. It was great to meet you.
Awesome. You too.